Hello everybody, welcome to this afternoon's Speakers for Schools virtual talk. We're delighted so many students from across our schools network have been able to join us. This session will last around 40 to 45 minutes and will include a presentation from our speaker before moving to Q&A. Questions for our speaker can be submitted via the Q&A function on the right hand side of your screen, and this will be open towards the end of the event. Unfortunately, we will not be able to answer all submitted questions. We have several hundred questions submitted in every talk, and there's simply not enough time to answer them all. I'm delighted to welcome this afternoon's speaker, Dan Connolly, Sports Marketing Executive at Console Sports Club. Dan has joined us today to discuss how to turn your passion into a career and explain what a career in sports marketing might look like.
Cool. Are we on?
Almost. Dan, hi, welcome to your virtual talk. Thank you for making the time to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Lily. And can I just say thank you to everybody who's made a little bit of time to get together and have a little bit of a chat about the sports industry. I am very, very fortunate to do a lot of talks with Speakers for Schools, and that is thanks to the really hard work of Lily and Carly, who organise different opportunities for me. And the real reason that I go and visit these different schools is to learn. You know, I get to meet some amazing students. I get to hear what you think about what's going on in the world. I get to be around your enthusiasm, and I get to find out what you think about the sports industry. And I just want to thank you on this occasion for helping me learn about something new again, because I've never done a video presentation like this before. So I'm in uncharted waters, and I hope that I'm able to do something that keeps you interested for the next 45 minutes. So as Lily said, this talk is about how I believe you can turn your passion into a career. And I usually have quite a lot of interactive elements in my talks when I'm with students. Obviously, it's a little bit more challenging to do that when we're all spread all over the country. But I will just ask you to have a look at this picture and you know, maybe say to whoever's around you what you think it is, or maybe even send a little text note into Lily. And that is the old Wembley Stadium, and that is very, very important to my personal life and my personal story. And we're going to come back to Wembley Stadium a little bit later, but I just wanted to plant it in your mind before we get going. So in terms of what we are going to cover today, I want to talk to you about why I believe passion is important to try and propel you through a career. I'm then going to talk a little bit about the industry I work in and provide you some context about the type of things that I've been doing in sports marketing, how that fits together. And then once you have that perspective, I want to provide you with my story and how I went through my career. And that's not intended to be any kind of, you know, self-aggrandizing thing. The reason I like to do that is because I've really, you know, been, I've come from quite a normal background, and I've had a huge amount of help from a lot of people over time. And I just want to be able to talk you through that story a little, and in doing so, make you realize that wherever you're sat now, whatever you're studying, whatever you're thinking about, it's absolutely possible for you to get to where you would like to in your career. Then as we get to the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've learned, and then hopefully we can kind of go through a few practical tips and turn it over to some questions. So the central question that I want everybody to consider is whether your passion is really something that's worth pursuing seriously, because different people have got different views on this. I'm very fortunate in the way that my life and my career have really been shaped around my personal passion, which is for sport, specifically for football, and for writing and telling stories. And those things have really helped me achieve things I could never have imagined when I was 12 years old. But there are lots of people who think that your passions are in some way frivolous. And there's an example here of a guy called Mark Cuban. I don't know if any of you guys know him, but he presents a show called Shark Tank in the USA, which is something that finds entrepreneurs. And he says, don't follow your passion. Rather, what he thinks people should do is just get really good at something, really good at a fundamental skill. And then because of getting good at it, you become more passionate. Now, and I understand why some people will say that, you know, following your passion in some ways gets a bad rep, because the way that people talk about it is as though it's some kind of secret. I'll just follow your passion and everything will work out. Well, that's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that your passion, combined with the fundamentals that you need to get on in life and society and business, if you combine those two things, then you can really get on. And I'm going to talk through a few practical tips here related to this, and we're going to come back to them a couple of times over the presentation. But the first thing is, I believe strongly in nurturing your own passion, because when you combine that with your friends, your family background, where you're from, it creates something that's totally unique and cannot be replicated by other people elsewhere. So there is a practical reason why you would follow your passion. The second thing is that, you know, you use your passion to motivate you to master skills that potentially you might not want to master otherwise. And I'll give the example of myself here. I was not a numerate student when I was at school. I didn't like maths, and I sort of struggled through and managed to get a GCSE qualification, but no more. However, in working in the sports industry and at various times being involved in running businesses, I've absolutely had to get a grip on numbers and understand how to run budgets and manage balance sheets. And the reason that I've done that is because I want to do more and more interesting things in sport. So I had to master that fundamental skill to get there. And that's something that I think, you know, your passion can drive you to master fundamental skills. The next thing I would say is to be inspired by your role models and then learn about their journeys. So, you know, through my life, I've had tons of role models. Some of them are footballers. I'll go back to when I was a very young kid. There's a guy called Paul Merson who I adored, and I would sort of look at what he was doing and try and copy him as a player. As I've got older, I've had more kind of creative and business role models, whether it's a film director like Steven Spielberg, whether it's a kind of historical entertainment figure like Walt Disney. And, you know, I believe that you can look at these role models, and by looking at their journey and, you know, reading things, watching presentations they've done, watching documentaries about them, listening to podcasts, by doing that, you can really fast forward some of your own learning, and it's very motivating. And some of these role models won't just be people that are in the public eye. These might be people that you're lucky enough to know at school. It might be somebody who's in a year age group who's older than you. It might be a teacher. You know, in my you know, life, I've been very fortunate to have worked with so many people who I consider role models. One is a man named David Dean, who I think some of you may have seen deliver one of these talks either virtually or in person, because he travels all over the country presenting. David is one of the most significant figures in modern football. He was vice chairman of Arsenal, he was vice chairman of the FA, and he was one of the founding forces or founding individuals behind the Premier League. And David's kind of impact on the club that I support, Arsenal, can be seen from the fact that when he joined the club as vice chairman, they hadn't won the league for 10 years. And then in the time when he was involved running the club, they won the league 5 times. And then in the time since he left, which is just over 10 years, they haven't won the league at all. So that shows he's a very significant figure in football. I've been very fortunate to have learned some really big lessons from him about business strategy. But I've also been very fortunate to learn some very small lessons from him, like make sure you remember people's names. And you know, the thing more than anything else that I've learned is you got to keep learning, you got to keep looking forward. So on this point 3, it's really crucial. If there are people that you aspire or people that you are particularly interested in, learn more about them, because it will really fast forward your education. So then the next thing, and this is something where you have an advantage over somebody like me. You know, I'm now approaching middle age, no matter how kind of energetic I think I am. And that means that I am not as in touch with the latest trends and the latest technology as people like you guys will be when you're in school. Okay, you're going to have an intuitive understanding of how to use things and what's coming next. It lasts for about 5 to 10 years after you get out of school. So make the most of it while you've got it. And then number 5, which kind of it fits in some way with this notion of technology, you have an opportunity now to package yourselves up in a way that people couldn't 30 or 40 years ago. You have this thing. You have a mobile phone which has the power of probably a Hollywood studio from the 1980s, and it's in your pocket, and it gives you the distribution to reach whoever you want, whenever you want. So think carefully about how you want to tell your own story and put across your kind of achievements. And then finally, if you decide that you have a certain passion and a certain career that you want to follow, it might be music, it might be dance, it might be theatre, it might be film, who knows what it is. But once you have a sense of what you would want to do in that industry, again, you've got that phone, you've got access to the internet, you've got all these other things, research. And then once you have got a picture of this, try to find somebody who's in the job that you want to have, get in touch with that person, learn from that person, and maybe through that conversation, you'll end up getting experience. And ultimately, it's experience that will end up propelling you through your career. Okay, so there are the 6 points. We're going to come back to them a couple of times. So hopefully you'll have remembered a few of those. Now, in terms of my own passion, I have a philosophy that has taken me through my career, which is sport for life. And the kind of mission behind that philosophy in terms of business is, with my company, I want to be able to earn lifelong relationships between contributors to the sports industry and communities through creative collaborations that empower growth for the individual and growth for the contributor, whether it's a media company, whether it's a commercial brand sponsor, etc. And ideally, you know, where there is a role for somebody like me who works in sports marketing is at the intersection where all these different things exist around sport. I try to bring them together for the best interests of the fan, because if these different elements of the commercial side of sport focus on what's good for the fan wins, and the people who are spending the money investing in sport, media companies, brands, they always win if they focus on the fan. So that's what I try and do, bring together these collaborations. And here are some of the companies, rights holders, brands, media companies that I've been fortunate enough to work directly with in client consulting, not just with my own firm now, but prior to that, when I worked for other companies. And coming up next, I'm just going to show you a very short video just to give you a sense of the kinds of things that I've been able to do with some of these companies.
I was surprised by Barclays. Would I like to hand Vincent Company the trophy? And if someone had told me that 3 years ago when I was laying brick, I would have hit them on the head with a trowel.
Hello, welcome to Connolly VTALK.
Managed to create space for Kane. Oh, it's absolutely brilliant! Absolutely incredible. So tell us about the competition. Your passion is your ticket.
Cool. So I'm sure that video is probably quite juddery from your side, but hopefully you spotted a few people there. You know, Harry Kane, Alan Shearer, Alex Scott, people like that who you're aware of, and I'm very fortunate to have worked with some really interesting people in delivering some of those events and developing some of that content. So now the next section we're going to move into is just to try and provide you with some context about the sports industry and where the opportunities might be for you to get employment there in the future. And just one thing as I kind of move into this section that I want to get across is hopefully there are some people here who are hugely into sport and would like to pursue some kind, or would like to at least understand how they could pursue some kind of career in sport. For those of you who aren't interested in sport, I just want you to think about what it is that you're passionate about. And then as I go through this section and I go through the section about my own career, I just want you to take some of these principles and think about how you could apply them to your own passion. But anyway, talking specifically about sport, which is what I love. I just want to give you some broad industry statistics. The first is related directly to the sports industry. Now, the two important figures in there are the number of people that sport directly employs, which is 600,000. And then beyond that, there are around 1 million jobs that are related to sport. Now, sport sits in the media and entertainment sector of the economy. That's even bigger than the sports industry. In fact, 3-4 times bigger than the sports industry. And then both of those sectors fit within what is termed as the creative industries. And the creative industries also involve digital technology, which obviously now we're all in lockdown, we understand digital really is, you know, the kind of infrastructure and the way of living that we're all going to be involved with over the next, you know, generation. But the key thing, I put up some financial figures there. Finance is just something that helps you create opportunities and make things happen. The key thing there is that this sector is growing twice as fast as the UK economy. So, and the reason that I bring this up is I often hear from students who say, no one has ever told us that I could get a job in the creative industries or I could get a job in the sports industries. You know, potentially the advice you're getting doesn't take into account the huge growth that there's been over the last 2 or 3 decades. And, you know, that when I was younger, people would talk about sport as though it was what they would refer to as a plum job. You know, you can dream about it, but it would never happen. Well, the reason I show you this slide is to say, practically, there's 2 times as much growth in this sector than there is in the rest of the economy, which should mean at least 2 times as many jobs being created. Jobs equals opportunities for people like you guys. So next, I want to actually talk about some of the kind of specific things that you could do within the sports industry. And, you know, on a basic level, anything that you could imagine within the economy as a whole exists in the sports industry. So we have lawyers, we have marketing and communication executives like myself, people that do partnerships between media and brands and sports bodies. We've now got increasingly more and more statisticians. We've got, you know, all the whole spectrum of the economy is within the sports industry. And I just wanted to show you this. This isn't sports marketing, but I'm sure you guys probably recognise Phil Neville and the England women's team there from last year's World Cup. But that guy there is my friend Ritan. So me and Ritan played football together when we were at school, and we used to open the bowling together in cricket. Now, Ritan didn't plan to have a career in sport. He trained as a doctor. He's a very, very good doctor. But because the sports industry was getting bigger and bigger, he actually had an opportunity open up to go and work with the FA. And he's now very involved coming up with some of the medical protocols which will be necessary for the kind of the COVID era that we're going to go through, with lots of testing of players to make sure that everybody's healthy and safe. So again, I put Ritan up there to say, like, opportunities do come up for people when an industry is growing in the way that sport has been. So moving back to you know, the sports industries and where sports marketing fits in, I just want to talk on a basic level about the sports value cycle. And that is that for sports to be successful, whether it's football or cricket or rugby or tennis, it all starts with a brilliant event that people want to see, a great show with unscripted drama and amazing competitors and fabulous characters. If you have that, you can earn attention. You earn attention through television, you earn attention through digital, social media, news, publicity. And ultimately, if you can earn attention, you can generate value. That value might come in subscriptions to the TV companies that pay to watch your, pay to broadcast your sport. It might come from ticketing, it might come from selling shirts, it might come from sponsorship and advertising, but you have to get those things right to generate value. And then we all know that sport is an intrinsic part of society. So once you've generated that value, once you've generated that money, some of that money needs to go into CSR, corporate social responsibility. And it's not just money, it's also resources. So again, if you look at the way that a lot of sports teams and clubs have been involved with COVID-19, the crisis that we've just been going through. Some of them have donated money, and you've seen you know, various players donating money to the NHS, but they're also donating their time, they're donating their fame, they're donating their kind of their charisma, their skills, and these are things that are absolutely fundamental to the way that sport develops. And if you do that, it goes back around again. You keep putting on a great show, earning attention, generating value, CSR. So specifically in sports marketing, there are three main areas where sports can generate income that will pay for a better show and more growth. So this is a chart which shows Premier League revenues. And those Premier League revenues tend to be split between commercial, match day and broadcasting. This is a little bit out of date, it's a season old, but as you can see, the main area of income is from broadcasting. There's then a good chunk from match day and a decent chunk from commercial. And again, coming back to what I said at the beginning, if you focus these things on the benefits and the experience that the fan's going to get, then everybody's going to win. But there is a fourth factor. It's not just about those three areas, big areas of generating an income. There's a fourth factor, which is innovations that happen. You know, the way that society and the economy and people's behaviour shifts. And one thing that has happened over the last few years is that we have shifted into this increasingly digitized economy. And the mega companies in this economy are called the FANGs. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And because of the way that they have become such a huge part of our lives, it has changed the way that people are experiencing all forms of media. And it has prompted something called the streaming wars. I don't know if anybody's heard of this term, the streaming wars, but it's basically where we've gone from watching things when broadcasters tell us we should watch them, and lots of people watching things at the same time on what is called linear television, so that might be Virgin or Sky or the BBC. We've gone from that, and instead we moved to something that's much more personalized, and that's what Netflix have specialized in. That's what Amazon have done for a few years, and that is why Disney have launched their own streaming service, which you may have, called Disney Plus. Now, all of these guys are spending a lot of money developing scripted programming, whether it is The Mandalorian, whether it's The Witcher. You know, they want to create programming that gets you to subscribe. But everybody's watching different things. Lily and I and Carly and yourselves, if you pulled up our Netflix screen, it would show completely different programs that we watch and choices that we have. But there is one thing in this mass fragmentation of media that has consistently been able to put together big live audiences, and that thing is sport. And I'm going to talk specifically about football for a couple of minutes. Here is Harry Kane, who was heroic at the 2018 World Cup. And the viewing figures from the 2018 World Cup at the time of this media fragmentation were astonishing. 26 million people watched England versus Croatia. There are only 66 million people in the UK, and some of them are Scottish, and some of them are Welsh, and some of them are Northern Irish. So that is a huge proportion of people who are English who are watching that. And if you are able to deliver live audiences at a time where no other media types of content are able to do it, then it is going to have a big impact on the amount of money that broadcasters and media platforms are willing to pay. And again, this chart here is slightly out of date. It goes up to 2019. But what I want to show you here is the growth of the Premier League's domestic broadcast rights. So you see that there in 1992. Now look where it is in 2019. And actually, if we move on to where we are now in 2020, the Premier League, from its domestic and its international broadcast rights, is making around 3 billion sterling, £3 billion per year. And going back to what I said earlier, I'm not talking about money to be vulgar. I'm talking about money because that is what creates new opportunities and hopefully new careers for people like you who are going to come into the workplace. So that takes us to the end of this section, trying to put the sports industry in context. And actually now I just want to go back to that circle that we have at the bottom from 1992 to 1997, because that's when I was at school, and we're going to go back in time to when I was at school, and we're going to, you know, get a bit of a feel for how my career evolved. But before we do that, a little recap. Passion and the fundamentals. We're going to come back to this at the end. Let's see how many of these that you can remember. So starting out in my career, I mentioned Wembley Stadium earlier. There it is, the old Wembley Stadium. Now, the reason that this is significant in my own life is that I could see Wembley Stadium from my bedroom window from the age of, I don't know, whenever I first got consciousness and can remember, 3 years old, I'd look outside, I could see this stadium. So every morning I'd wake up, I might be tired, and then I just look up, I fall out of bed, and oh my God, I'm completely inspired by this icon. I could see the Twin Towers, and you know, I could see the floodlights, and it just made me unbelievably kind of excited. It still does now when I think about it. Next, there is the Arsenal football team from 1991, and that is a collector's item of a photo because that is a time when Arsenal used to win league titles. And then above, the two guys you'll see there, one is Gary Lineker and the other is John Barnes, not playing football, but in his sideline, which is he used to do a lot of music. And this was the England team song from 1990 called World in Motion. So I became obsessed by football after Italia 1990 and after Arsenal had brilliant teams in the late 80s and the early 90s. So, of course, that obsession meant that I wanted to be a footballer, just like anybody who sees these guys. But what was the problem? As you can see, I got to school, there are a few hurdles ahead. As much as I love football and I could play for my school team, I wasn't very good. So there wasn't really going to be any professional football career on the horizon for me. But, you know, nevertheless, I spent a lot of my time at school with these two kind of passions, these obsessions, if you like. One being football and sport, and the other being writing. But what I found was I actually had, you know, a little bit of trouble in the first few years of school. My parents went through a really difficult divorce. And around that time, when I was probably 12, 13, I got myself a new nickname. Now, in a lot of ways, it's good to have a nickname because it helps you stand out for the crowd. My nickname, though, was the Thick Irishman. And that didn't necessarily help with my self-confidence. And as I was going through that period of potentially not thinking I was particularly bright. Here are some of my school reports. So you can see where in the subjects where I wasn't so passionate and focused like I was with writing, here you go, there's some D's, there's some E's, some more D's, and just a couple of comments from some teachers who maybe didn't like me so much. Daniel stands no chance, and on Daniel's last test he scored 0. So if those teachers had been involved with, you know, my progress, I probably wouldn't have got very far, because I didn't put enough effort into their classes. Not their fault, completely my fault. I didn't put enough effort into their classes, and they just looked at me and they thought, well, that's the guy who plays football, loves sport, apparently likes writing essays, but that's not going to be enough for him. But I was really lucky. The teachers who did teach football, who were interested in writing and essays, they said, you know what, Dan has got these skills, and if we can help him, you know, motivate himself through these skills and then get some of the other basics he needs, like maths, then we can get him onto another level where he will have opportunities in the workplace. And I'm very fortunate to those teachers who did that. And I ended up actually in my school, even after these terrible report cards, I was head of school, and then I was able to go to Exeter University. And at Exeter University, I was surrounded by other like-minded people, people who just loved sport, loved writing, and, you know, loved stories. And I was able to really thrive in that environment, being around people who would challenge me and you know, allow me to have stimulating conversations. So I'm having a great time. I'm playing sport, playing for the cricket team, I'm playing football, and, you know, I even, you know, kept following that passion for sport and convinced the professors at Exeter University to let me, I was studying history, and they let me be the first student at Exeter University to do a master's in sports history, because I thought, right, I love sport, I'm just going to keep going on this sports bandwagon. But the problem was, I didn't see at the time what the career opportunities would be in sport. I didn't know what existed. The internet wasn't quite as advanced then, and I just didn't know what might be possible. And I had this thing in the back of my mind, all these teachers who said, oh, there's no jobs in sport, I don't know why you would even try and pursue it. However, I was fortunate, and, you know, through the rest of my career, you know, most of the moves forward have been marked by good fortune. And in this instance, I was working for Exeter City as a youth team football coach, and I was working for the local charity, which is Exeter in the Community. And it transpired that there was a public relations agency in London that had just started doing work for Kellogg's, who were going to sponsor football in the community. So when I sent my CV into them, they looked at that new sponsorship and they looked at my experience and they thought, right, let's get this guy in. And I did some work experience, and then I got a graduate job with them. And that led to several years working for sports marketing and PR agencies. And, you know, my main 2 clients during that time were Nike and Barclays. And I owe an enormous amount of gratitude to the people I work with there and to those companies for giving me the opportunity to work with people like Wayne Rooney and Cristiano Ronaldo, Steven Gerrard. And you know, the lessons that I learned at that stage in my career come to me every day now when I, you know, having my own business. And through that process of working on, you know, big sports marketing campaigns and advertising campaigns with the likes of Nike, I was able to fulfill the dream that I had of, you know, representing my country. Now, I thought I was going to represent my country as a footballer when I was aged 11. By the time I was aged 11 and a half, I realised that was probably not going to happen. But as an administrator, I was able to do so for England's bid for the 2018 World Cup. And I was in the communications and publicity team, and I was fortunate to travel all over the world as we went to try and ask FIFA to support our bid to stage that World Cup. And in that process, I don't know if you remember those pictures from earlier on of John Barnes and Gary Lineker, but I was able to work with John Barnes. I was able to work with Gary Lineker, these two people that I idolised when I was a kid, and now I was kind of colleagues with them as we were going into meetings and doing publicity events and stuff like that. And also in the bottom next to David Beckham and Prince William, you'll see David Dean, who was our international president and who I referred to earlier as the man who was part of forming the Premier League and ran Arsenal. Now, this was the most extraordinary experience. It was like getting 15 years experience in a couple of years, because all of football was involved with this, from the FA to the Premier League to the clubs to the sponsors to the broadcasters, and we got to travel all over the world. So an unbelievable opportunity to learn. However, as much as I love this, it does not necessarily have a happy ending, because for those of you who are paying attention, in 2018, the World Cup was not in England. The World Cup was in Russia. And whenever I look at this picture, which is where Russia were told that they had been awarded the rights, it just makes me feel a little tightening in the stomach. It makes me feel a little bit, that kind of that feeling of shock and failure. And it's something that kind of never really left me. And I remember at the time when we lost, I came out of that bid, and it took a long, an amount of time to get over it. But I was then fortunate to get an opportunity to work with some people to try and help build a sports marketing business for an advertising agency called Havas. And over time, we were able to build a really decent portfolio of companies that were sponsoring sports events. So people like Barclays, people like Coca-Cola. And what I was able to do was take a lot of the contacts that I had when I was at England 2018 and use that to help the team that I was putting together in delivering a lot of this work. But almost, more crucially for me, I was able to take a lot of the philosophy of England 2018 and bring it into the work of people like Barclays. And the guy who is circled at the moment, his name is Eddie Apakafi. Eddie presented our bid to FIFA when we were trying to get the 2018 World Cup. And he said, "Football changed my life." And his story was that he had been in gangs when he was younger. He'd got himself into some really bad trouble. He'd ended up in prison, but he had come out of prison and he trained as a football coach, and then he'd gone into communities and he had tried to help kids just like him not repeat those mistakes. I thought that was really powerful, and I didn't think enough of those types of stories were told. So I was fortunate with a great team at Havas to be able to get some of those stories told. And as I say, it's all about teamwork. I would never have been able to experience all those things had I not had great people around me. And probably one of the most gratifying things was seeing, I was at Havas for 7 years, and seeing people who were probably not that much older than some of you guys, just left university, 21, 22 years old. Some of those guys, when I started, by the time I'd left, they were basically running big accounts for people like Coca-Cola, or they were running the business in some cases. So that feeling of being part of a team is wonderful. And even for you guys now who are all on lockdown, you're still part of a team. You're still in it together, and your kind of your peers, your friends in class, all of you guys will be able to help each other, not just through school now, but 20 years since I left school, there are people, we're still helping each other out. So, teamwork is unbelievably important, even in your own individual career pursuit. So that was my kind of commercial career working for agencies. But I had kind of 7 years or so with Havas, and I got to a point where I realised that I'd kind of reached the end of the journey there. There probably wasn't much more that I could do other than hand over to that great team that was there. So I thought, well, what do I want to do? Could I go and work for another company and try and help them develop something like that? Or is there something else I could do with these values that I've got for Sport for Life? And I thought back to kind of where my family were from. And my granddad was a kind of peasant farmer when he was young, growing up in Ireland, very, very impoverished background, and the whole family left Ireland. Some went to, this is in the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 30s, some went to America, some went to London. My granddad went to London. He'd left school aged 8, but he had a lot of kind of drive and determination, and he formed his own building company, and that company was called Consul. My dad then, you know, my grandfather was what they call a blue collar worker. My dad was then able to work as a building surveyor and had his own company called Consul. He is a white collar worker. So I thought, well, do you know what? I would like my own company called Consul Sports Club. And now I am a no collar worker because I get to work in sport. And I would not have had that opportunity without my grandfather and the sacrifices he made. So, you know, the company is my way of paying tribute. But coming up with a nice story about how you got the same company name as your granddad doesn't necessarily win you that much business. When I started, I had no clients. So, you know, I had to get busy and try and find clients. And I had this idea that, you know, I've obviously had this experience of working for England in 2018, and my wife and all of her family are American. And at the time, America were bidding for the 2026 World Cup with Canada and Mexico. And I thought there must be a way of me helping those guys out. I'm not quite sure how. I tried all kinds of routes to get there. And again, I was unbelievably fortunate with some lucky breaks that made an opening on the team become available, but also people making recommendations and getting me there. So I was in a position where, having lost with England 2018, I was now part of a winning bid for 2026. And we found out that we'd won on the day of the 2018 World Cup, or the day before the 2018 World Cup starting in Russia. So I felt like in some way that closed the loop on some of that pain that I'd had with England 2018, and kind of off the back of doing this work, lots of opportunities have opened up. I do a lot of work in America, and I've got some you know, clients like the Premier League in the UK that I'm very fortunate to work with for my own consulting firm. So that's my story, and I hope that I've been able to get across to you that I have had a huge amount of good fortune. I've also had lots of people who have been supporting me, whether it's teammates, whether it's mentors, whether it's role models, who have helped create those opportunities for me. I've also been the beneficiary of the sports industry growing. And what I want to talk to you about now is the fact that the sports industry has grown and it has opened up these new opportunities, but we're not necessarily getting the pipeline of talent that represents that growth. We tend to, at the moment, be recruiting a lot of people who know people. And that happens because people like you don't necessarily know the opportunities exist in the sports industry. We need more diversity, we need fresh thinking and new ideas, and it's people like you who are going to bring them. So on that note, specifically, I have a question to ask, which maybe we can cover at the end if you want to send in your messages. We are going to go through a period in sport, in cricket and football and tennis and rugby and all these other great sports, athletics that we love, where potentially there are going to be, for a long time, no fans in stadiums or just a few fans in stadiums. Now, I think that is obviously disappointing because we're so used to the roar of the crowd and the passion, but it will open up opportunities for innovation and creativity. And everybody who's putting on those games is looking for bright ideas for how they can make the experience better for people who are watching at home, and also how they can find ways to get the people at home to be making a contribution to the atmosphere in those stadiums. So if people have got bright ideas, I'd love to hear them. So please send your messages through to Lily. And finally, I just want to leave you with a campaign that I was lucky enough to work on at Habas, where we gave, because of this belief that not enough diversity was getting into the sports industry, we worked with Barclays, the Premier League, and many other partners such as the O2, to provide people with work experience, and we called this program Work Experience of a Lifetime. And we put together a little video with Tiny Temper, who was the ambassador. So maybe just have a little listen to what Tiny's got to say.
Passion. There's something that grows inside us. Inside me, inside you, inside all of us. A desire to achieve no matter what. Life can be tough. The dreams don't get handed to you. But never lower your expectations or be the person you don't want to become. Start making decisions, the small ones and the big ones, and back them with all the belief and passion you can. There's a whole world of excitement and opportunity out there for all of us. Find it. If you have a passion, follow it. Your passion is your ticket.
Right, so I hope you guys could catch some of that video with the lag and everything that's inevitable on these video conferences. But the main message from Tiny Temper was your passion is your ticket. And I hope that's something that all of you, having listened to what I've had to say, maybe feel a little bit more strongly about now than you may have done at the beginning. And I just want to have a little recap of the things that we talked about right at the start in terms of using the passion and combining them with the fundamentals, these practical tips to try and help you to follow your passion into a career. Nurture your passion because it's the thing most unique to you. Use your passion to motivate you to master those fundamentals. Be inspired by your role models and learn about their journeys. Stay ahead of trends. Remember, that is a huge advantage to you guys over somebody who's a little bit older like me, or a lot older. Package yourself up. Don't be afraid to tell your own story. No one will ever tell it as well as you can. And then finally, look at the opportunities that you want and then research, try to meet people, try to get experience. So just leave those up there for a second. Hopefully some of those things are going to be sinking in and will be making you think about how you could apply some of those kind of action points, if you like, to your own, planning. And then there's one last thing I want to be able to say. Thank you very much to all of you for taking the time to stick with me and be together to listen to this presentation. Thank you to Lily, thank you to Carly, and then I think we're going to have a couple of questions if any have come through. But there is one last thing I wanted to be able to say. And that is that I want all of you to believe that it's possible. Believe that it's possible, because remember what I told you about when I was a little boy. I'd fall out of bed and I'd look out and I'd see Wembley Stadium from my bedroom window. Well, when I had my first day, of working with the Football Association, when I was working on that England 2018 World Cup bid, I sat down for a meeting with my colleagues on the team. And from Wembley Stadium, which is where our office was, I looked out the window and I could see my house and my bedroom window. So please believe that it is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. We've got a couple of minutes for some questions from students. To kick off, what is the best bit about your job?
People. Definitely the types of people that you get to meet. And it's not just, it's an easy thing to say, getting to work with people, be around people is a great thing anytime. What is special about working with people in sport is that they choose to be there. So, whether it is an amazing athlete like Harry Kane or Cristiano Ronaldo, who've turned their playing of the game into their life's work and honed their skills, or whether it is a young girl who is going to their first game and, through the kind of the sponsorship and media and marketing work I've been able to do, you meet people like that. What's special is they have chosen to be there. It's something that they love, and that creates a really incredible energy. So it's definitely people for me.
Great, thanks, Dan. We've got a question from another Dan that asks, "Hi, Dan. For a sixth form for a sixth form student like myself, would you suggest going straight into a sports business university like UCFB, or go to a normal university and then move into sports marketing?"
Okay, so very, very good question. And I've seen some of the work that those guys have done. There'll be at a lot of conferences, and they have grown significantly in the last 10 years. I remember they, in fact, where we were working in England 2018 at Wembley Stadium is where they have one of their offices. So tremendous organisation, and there are other tremendous sports business organisations. I think you can learn a huge amount. The thing that I would consider from your perspective is, if you go and get a broader based university degree, it's say in the humanities, you will have a lot of those lessons that you will have learned from there that will be really universal. And those lessons that you learn that are universal, you can supplement while you're doing them by getting experience in sport and trying to, take other courses related to sport. Plus, you could go and do some kind of sports masters afterwards. So, maybe it's just because of the experience that I've had. I would tend to encourage people to go down the broader based education first and then start to do something specialist. However, the work that those guys are doing is really contributing to the sports industry. And were you to take that choice, I'm sure you would have an amazing experience, and you would also be very valuable to companies and clubs and leagues and rights holders when you come out.
Thank you so much. We've got a question from Irene, who asks, "What sport have you played but really didn't like?"
I mean, I like most sports, but I don't necessarily have the balance and the skill for all sports. So I don't know if you count it completely as a sport, but my wife's family are hugely into horse riding. They're from kind of the ranches in California, and they grew up on horses. And I hate being on horses. Hate it. Causes me a lot of pain, makes me very anxious. So actually, if there was one thing I would like, it would be to be flexible enough to be able to ride horses better and spend more time with my wife doing it. So is that a fair answer?
Yeah, I think so. We've got a question from an anonymous student right now that asks, "Would being good at managing sport events correlate to managing e-sport events?"
Ultimately, when you are looking at the different disciplines, domain disciplines that exist within the sports industry, might be events, it might be public relations, it might be accountancy, it might be just more general management. All of those things are applicable to other industries, whether it's music, whether it is just might be education. So on that side of things, yes, if you are used to working in sports events, then it's applicable to esports. In terms of the crossover between sport and esports, so my view on this is, a lot of people talk about sport and esports as though they're kind of one thing. My view is that you have competitive sports simulations that are absolutely related to the sports industry. So, EA FIFA games, that kind of thing. You then have other kind of, League of Legends, stuff like that. That I actually see more as broader entertainment rather than sport. But coming back to the initial question, is putting on sports events similar to that? What's similar is that the people who want to watch those things and the people who participate in those things are choosing to be there. It is their passion that drives them to be around it. And if you work in sport, you understand that it's not just a transactional relationship that the person going to a sports event or watching a sports event has. It's passion, that drives them in there. And so there's a much deeper relationship, and there's much more of an ownership. And I would say in that regard, there's a lot of crossover. So I can certainly see more and more in the next few years. You may have people who have careers where they're involved in sports events and they're involved in esports events and they're working within the same agency. So good question, and if it's something that he or she wants to pursue, there could for sure be opportunities.
Thank you so much. Katie asks, as a sixth form student, how can I prepare for a career in sports marketing?
Good question. I would say, to begin with, get clear on what it is ultimately that you would like to do in sports marketing, so you can learn more about it, and then really understand the fundamentals of marketing, because I would imagine if you're choosing to be in sport, then you probably already like it. So that bit is going to be taken care of. And that, you know, I read a huge amount about sports history. I watch sport all the time. I talk about sport all the time. That's just there. Now, when I was in sixth form, I didn't talk to anybody about marketing ever. So what I would suggest is learn about the fundamentals of marketing. That will really help you to be ready for a career in sports marketing. And beneath that, learn about the fundamentals that link to marketing. So that is ultimately understanding human behavior and the relationships that people have between, you know, each other, and then understanding how stories are told. That's really what marketing is. Do those things in terms of education, and then on the other side, because you've gone off and you've got a sense of where it is, the job that you would like to have in sports marketing, learn about that job, learn about that company or companies you would like to work for, and then write to them, keep writing to them, be persistent, and find a reason why you should be able to go there and get experience. That help? I hope so.
It would help me if I was into sports marketing, absolutely. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much, Dan. There has been a student feedback form posted in the Q&A thread, and the colour for today's talk is coconut. Thank you so much, Dan. We'll be in touch soon, and thanks for watching.
Guys, thank you so much for your time and interest.
Have a lovely day.
Cheers, guys.